Alright, time to remove a trunnion on each side. I'm going to remove one from this side, one from this side. They will be opposite each other. And again, this piece will end up Z-shaped. So, I have an idea what I'm doing, which is something different for me. I'm actually going to take a piece of tape and mark the two sides I want to remove. One there. One here. I chose the depth of cut here so I could use a piece of 3/8 MDO to support the link as I machine a trunnion off. If I would not have picked a fairly standard size, I would have had to make something up. I am going to machine the trunnion off without the use of the rear fence. I will use the sliding fence and a backup board. I will judge where I am to the bit and again take about 1/4 inch off each time. The fence being moved back, dust collection is pretty useless with it. So I've gone ahead and installed the drapery tool and got it mounted to the table to pick up the dust. I am doing this with the tape down, and when I flip this over to do the opposite side, again, the tape will be down. This will allow me to hopefully not make a mistake, because I really don't feel like remaking one of these. In this particular case, we can go ahead and install a feather board just for safety. Keep my fingers out of the way. Get it dropped down. And we're going to set it approximately centered over the bit. One side done, needs a little cleaning up, not too bad. Again, I want to see the tape at the bottom. That will allow this to become Z-shaped. The upper one here will remain, the lower one here will be also remain. This one little spot we're going to clean up. There you go. We now have a Z-shaped link. There will be one more shaping of the link, but until the bearings are machined, we're going to leave it square. The bearings for the suspension system came, and so did one of the bits I needed. And this here is a 1/2 by 1/4 non-extended bearing. This bearing is a 22 millimeter OD, 1/4 inch ID, extended race bearing. The bearing we're going to be working with first is the 1/2 inch. It is going to end up going in the flat side of the link here. Here. The extended bearing is going to go into the trunnion side here and here. The router bit I have in the table, and I've already set up the fences, is a 1/2 inch mortising bearing, and it's set to come up out of the table. I set the stop on the 1400, 343 thousandths of an inch, and the way I got that number was simply checking the shoulder. I actually want the bearing deep enough so once it's inside of the link, it recesses and the inner race is touched by this particular shoulder right here. That way it actually spins the inner race. The head of this bolt is 3 thousandths of an inch less in diameter than that bearing. I actually made sure when I ordered the bolt that it was slightly smaller than the bearing outer diameter. Now, as you can see, the fences are all set, and I didn't do most of this on a guess. When I originally drilled the 1/4 inch holes in the links, which you see here, there are 2 of them in this one, obviously, I made a test block for each step. In doing so, it allows me to make sure that the fences are set up so the bolt and bearing run on center. Dropped right in. You can see the head is slightly smaller than the opening, and the distance that it comes up, the bolt head is flush, and that's what I'm looking to achieve. Setting up the fences is just setting up the fences. You had to know your distances, and I knew my center line of that 1/4 inch hole was 7/8 of an inch from here to the center of the bit, 7/8 of an inch from here to the center of the bit. That is where I set the fences, and I ran a test. And obviously, it fits. Before I do the shouldered bearing with the 22 millimeter, I will also do a test in this block. How well does it fit? It's spinning on the inner race. There you go. I'll hold it this way. There you go. So we're going to go ahead and punch a couple 1/2 inch holes in it. I'm going to hopefully be able to demonstrate to you how well they fit. Again, the bit is only going to come up 342 thousandths, 43 thousandths of an inch, somewhere around there. And we're going to use the CMS lift. The router is obviously not locked because, again, I need to move it. The stop has been set. And again, just like a couple operations before, I'm going to use the featherboard on the CMS to hold the pieces down. I've set myself against the left fence and the back fence. I'm just making sure everything's nice and tight. Hard to tell, but they look pretty good. And let me grab the bolt nut, and we're going to go ahead and see how they fit up. So here we go. We got a bolt with the bearing on it. Went right in. And again, that hole that the bolt is going through in this link right now is still only 1/4 inch. I will probably increase its size a little bit later. One more. There we go. Spins free. So next step again is going to be changing out the bit. And I guess I should take the bearing out of here so I don't lose it. Changing out the bit, and then we're going to put a 22mm hole in the trunnion here. And then hopefully, if I get everything exactly correct, everything will still line up and the bolts will go right through. It's time to change the router bit to do the 22mm boring. I have a Festool bit that is 22mm in diameter, 8mm shank. I've already lowered the router completely, dropped it down. Hit the switch to make sure it was off, otherwise the clutch won't work, and I made sure the unit was unplugged. I had thought about setting a stop behind the fence in this area, here, off to the right back in here with the clamp, and setting a stop in front here with a clamp, and that would have allowed me to loosen the screws and pivot the fence. Then I could have brought it back into place. This fence I wasn't too concerned with because of it being on the dovetail. I could have just loosened the mounting bracket, slid the fence off, put it back on, and it should have ended up exactly where it was. To get everything to align, this fence system would have to go back exactly where it is now. I just decided it wasn't worth taking the chance in doing so. So again, I just dropped the router all the way. This is an 8mm shank bit. This is an 8mm collet, and we're going to go ahead and put it in the router. It's easy to do, even while the router's in the table. And with the ratchet, it does make this job fairly simple. You never want to seat a router bit totally, completely, and shoulder it. You always want to leave a little bit of room. So let me get it tightened up here. And again, I'm using the bent wrench underneath here. Works really well. I do have to release the stop rod because we're going to go to a different elevation. Again, this is going to be an extended bearing. So when it goes into the trunnion area, I actually want it to project out of the unit. So if I take a caliper, go right down the center, get it set, make sure it's all tight, set it. That particular shoulder is 475 thousandths, just under ½ inch. So we're going to set the bearing aside. Bring the router bit up, and just like anything else, we're just going to set the height. Right now I know I'm way high. That right there is 475 thousandths. Again, I want it to project approximately 5 thousandths, so I'm going to set the caliper to 470 thousandths and reset the bit. This is strictly a matter of feel. There we go, right there. I am not going to lock the router, but I am going to set the stop. So now when I use the lift mechanism, 1400 will come up against its stop, and that's as high as I'll be able to go. Again, we're back to the test piece. I'm not going to risk ruining a piece that I've spent the time on and have this be off slightly. So we have dust collection hooked up. I've reset the switch. Again, the feather board is holding everything in place. Now I have to check two things. Does it line up? And is my elevation correct? So, I'm going to set that bearing in on that side. Set this bearing in on this side. And see if the bolt will pass through it. Yeah, I guess so, huh? So, the piece will now pivot on a pair of bearings. It is sticking out a little bit, probably a little too much. I'm going to go ahead and check that with the caliper, see what my depth is, and make the necessary height adjustment. Alright, it's proud about 15 thousandths, so I'm going to go ahead and raise the bit. Just like that. And one of the things about the Festool routers, I can come under here and back the rod off slightly. I went 3/10 of a millimeter. We're going to go ahead and recut this piece and see what happens. Again, we're going to hold it down, start the unit. Okay, I'm checking the depth to the shoulder, which now is about 469.5 thousandths. The bearing was 475 thousandths, so I guess we can live with it. Let me double check the bearing height just to make sure. Yep, right around 475. So everything's all set up, and we'll get to making our links. Alright, because we are going to do the trunnion now, we want this to sit on plane, flat, square, whatever you want to call it, to the table. So I'm using my trusty 3/8 inch plywood. That down. Lock the feather board, start the unit, hold everything in place. Flip the piece around. Get all lined up again. Bring the feather board down. Machine through both sides. Now I guess we need to know whether or not everything's going to fit. So extended bearing went right through, spins easily. Other side, extended bearing right through. The bearings almost go in too easily. The sizes are exact. I normally like to see about 1/2 thousandth interference, but in this piece of wood and the fact that there will not be a lot of pressure against this system, I'm really not worried about the race spinning. So I can put a little bit of glue on it or epoxy just to make sure the race stays in place and solve the problem that way. So there's the links with their bearings. Next, we're going to go ahead and shape them around this curve, and back around the trunnion on the other side. So it will actually look like a dog bone. The reason why I went with two different size bearings, twofold. One, I wanted to leave the additional material in the link. I could have gone with probably just a 1/2 inch sleeve bearing all the way through, but I just felt it was a good idea to leave the additional material inside the link. And the second reason is I wanted an extended bearing on the trunnion side. When I put the bolt in and tighten everything, that extended race will actually come up against either the leg or the basket, and then everything will pivot on the balls. Some of you may have seen how I use my guide rails as router trammels. I need to make a pattern so I can make templates for the final shaping of the 4-link suspension. As you can see, there was a full-size template of the cradle under here. The end to my right down there that I showed you has the bolt in it. Comes along. I've already set this up. These are actually 2 of the stops for the TS. I have obviously checked to make sure I was where I wanted to be. And I'm going to take the 1010, set it in there, and make that cut. That will give me the curve that I'm going to transfer onto these 2 pieces. These 2 pieces will become the templates to finish shaping the 4-link. This tab on the guide rail bracket is what will hold the 1010 from moving on the rail. It obviously can be picked off the rail, so you do have to watch that. So here we go. We're going to probably do this in 2 passes. I'll see how it feels. There we go. The arc I need to transfer to the 4-link suspension. I did hold everything in place with a few 23 gauge pins. So there you go. I also had to add 2 extensions to the workbench to make it work. You can see how well you can adjust the 1010 for depth. It never hit the bench there. It did tear the paper. And in this area here, through the piece, and the paper is intact. Next, we'll go ahead and transfer this curve onto my templates. Now that we have the pattern, we're going to make the templates to shape the links. After this is routed and a shape put in it from here to here, this will actually come off. The reason why there's not two holes is this side here will be shaped once we run around this trunnion here. So, have marked the center line on the what's going to be the template. We have the center line on our pattern that we made. Template goes under the pattern, center line gets lined up, and the corners just touch. I need to hold it in place, so I'm going to take 23 gauge pinner and put some pins in it. Clamp it to the bench, just make sure nothing goes anywhere. Again, using 1010 router, I have taken out the 8mm bit that was in here, installed a 1/2 inch pattern bit, top bearing, and the dust shield. I've set the depth and locked it. The bearing will ride on our pattern, and the bit will cut the template. Because I am working on the outside of a pattern, the travel is from left to right or counterclockwise. If I was cutting the pattern inside of here, I would then be going clockwise from right to left. We're going to remove the template from the pattern. Remove the 23 gauge pins. Now we need to do the same for this side. Again, I'm going to go ahead, set the template on the center line. Take the pinner. And again, put the pattern to the template. I shifted it slightly because I would have hit the bench in the center. Going to clamp down the unit. It actually removed the one end while drying. It was stuck in the dust collection. Again, we're going to remove the template. So now this is going to go onto the forelink, and you can now see what the final shape is going to be. We'll get to routing the link later. Time to do the final shaping of the links for the suspension system. In the CMS, I've installed a CMT router bit, 2-inch cutting length, upper and lower bearings. This is a pattern cutting bit. It will work against the template. I have removed the primary fence and installed the freehand fence. It allows for dust collection at the rear and also gives you a starting pin, but instead of a simple starting pin, what Festool has done is they have put this arm in here. And by using that arm, instead of just coming up against one pin and rolling into the bearing, you can actually start on this bar here and it guides you into the system a little better. One other thing I've added is a dust pickup on this side. That's hooked to a CT22. I have to turn it on manually. As I'm routing, even though there is dust collection at the rear of the fence here and at the router is naturally throwing the debris this way. And I want to pick up as much of that as I can. You can see I've installed 2 templates, one on each side. I've also taken a jigsaw and cleaned out some of the material. The bit will need to be adjusted so that the bearing, this upper bearing to start with, is going to ride on this pattern. When you adjust it, you need to make certain that the bearing is going to hit your template and enough of the cutter comes up so you don't leave a line here. You want to remove all the material on the piece. Once it's adjusted, check the guide finger. That looks good. Double check your height. Looks good. Store the lift handle. Tighten the router. This is a shield to protect your fingers, or at least keep your fingers away from the bit. Just slides in. And you just need to leave a little space between the shield and the piece being routed. You don't want it to drag, and you kind of want to make sure everything feels okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it in and route this direction. When I come to this end, I will take off about 50% of the circle here. I will then flip it over and do the exact same thing. The final step will be is I will raise the bit, flip the piece over, and we will then work against the lower template. In doing so, it allows me to guide through the trunnions. So, I'm going to turn on the CT22. The 36 will come on automatically. One time, a little bit at a time until you get to the template. can see I've gone around what would be the upper trunnion on each side. Cleared off some so I don't have to take a lot off of the lower trunnion. And now we're going to go ahead and raise the bit. Actually, I'm going to take a little bit more off this side. Go ahead and raise the bit, and then we're going to use the lower bearing on the bit to finish forming this side against this trunnion. The reason why I don't do it with the upper bearing is I don't want to approach the bit in this direction and possibly have tear out of the grain. Have to move that out of the way. It does not raise high enough to help you out here much, so we're just going to get it out of the way. Again, check the bearing. Now I'm referencing off the lower bearing, which is right here. Looks good. Put the handle away, lift handle away, and make sure you tighten the router. Drop the bit a little more. It's leaving a little notch right there, which means I'm actually now between the cutter and the bearing. Gonna do the other side. There we go, the link shaped to the templates. The whole time I've referred to this to as a 4-link system. So you see that one. There's the other 3. You can see where the glue was holding the template on before. And I have to do some sanding, clean off the glue. Alcohol removes the hot melt glue pretty well. I have to decide whether I'm going to ease the edges on these. I haven't decided yet. So there you go. The making of the suspension system for a cradle. Thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of it.